blessings of God be upon you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for this wonderful speech. May we now please invite Professor Mustafa Sharif, former Minister of Higher Education and Scientific Research and Islamic Studies, to the stage.
Excellency, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, the thought and spirit of Emir القادر الجزائري, a non-enduring model across time, continue to inspire us to this day. His a vision that was at once profoundly Algerian and generally universal. He demonstrated that the path of moderation and balance, the pursuit of the complete human being, الإنسان الكامل, and the model of harmonious coexistence together constitute a foundational, essential, and multidimensional approach capable of contributing to the salvation of our world. كان الأمير يركز على 3 مراجع أساسية. الأولى هي الوسطية، الثانية هو الإنسان الكامل، والثالث هو العيش معا بسلام. The Emir maintaining that reality is not one-dimensional. Rather, it demands wisdom and equilibrium. He understood that the complete separation of antagonism between the fundamental dimension of existence, between faith and reasons, the temporal and the spiritual, unity and diversity, freedom and law, and the individual and the collective, inevitably give rise to disorder and ultimately to impasse. This dimension should neither be set against one another nor conflicted. His vision was one of harmony and balance. In today's disoriented world, the Emir points us towards an open path. In an age marked by the harshness, he teaches us compassion. In a world that has lost its bearings, he teaches us the importance of having the courage for constructive dialogue. If an area moving towards dehumanization, he reminds us that ethics must guide action and that thought should not become captive to the content of the moment. He thought also challenged narratives that divide, exclude, and oppress. He was a critical voice against all forms of extremism, clarifying essential questions and offering a renewed vision for the future. This scholarly, cultural, and historical gathering convenant within the great seat of learning affirm that the exceptional and illustration personality of Emir القادر الجزائري continues to radiate light across the world. He shaped history, thought, his foresight and profound humanity, and possessed an incomparable moral sensibility. When his people chose him as their leader, he declared, "I desire only to preserve honor of my people." They are words whose very utterance and our own age is difficult even to imagine this. The legacy of the Emir contributes to the restoration of trust between the people and social cohesion within society. الإرث الأمير يساهم في بناء الثقة بين الشعوب وداخل المجتمعات، همزة وصل فكرية وروحية. الأمير عبد القادر belongs to the heritage of Algeria, just as he belonged to the heritage of humanity as a whole. Through the establishment of the Emir Abd al-Qadir program at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, one of the most distinguished institutions of learning and scholarship in Britain and the wider world, the Center assumed a leading role in promoting dialogue between civilization, a dialogue of which the Emir himself was among the earliest pioneers. There could scarcely be a more fitting setting for the study of Emir Abd al-Qadir life and through than this eminent academic institution. He was a bridge between worlds, between East and West, between North and South. He was among the first to sow the seeds of freedom for the modern Algerian nation and one of the foremost defenders of oppressed people. Throughout his life, the Emir succeeded in unity, reality, and idealism, action and contemplation. His enduring aim was the formation to the complete human being, man and woman devoted to the common good. By conclusion, by virtue of his many dimensions of greatness, the Emir transcended the boundaries of his own age. In our present era of turmoil, humanity stands in greater need of his teaching than ever before. He would say that the best of people as those who bring the greatest benefits to their homeland and to humanity at large. كان يقول أحسن الإنسان هو في خدمة بلده والإنسانية كاملة. He was the fruit of his homeland Algeria, a land whose very name evokes freedom and which has been both a cradle of humanity and crossroads of civilization, despite the trial and challenge he has endured. For Emir Abd al-Qadir al-Jazairi, dialogue meant the cultivation of peaceful coexistence and the pursuit of the common good through reasons and wisdom. He reminded us that the principle underpinning the international order and human rights should not be imposed for the perspective of single culture. Rather, they must emerge from and be enriched by the reciprocal contribution of all culture. كان يقول النظام العالمي الدولي الحضاري لازم يكون يأخذ بعين الاعتبار تعددية الثقافات وليس اتجاه واحد من مصدر واحد. لازم التوازن والانسجام والتكامل بين الوحدة والتعددية. He struggled for a world founded upon mining, peace, and the just order remains more relevant today than ever before. Fidelity, الوفاء. Fidelity to the Emir legacy requires us to reconcile authenticity with progress. الوفاء للأمير يلزمنا أن نحقق التكامل والانسجام بين الأصالة والتقدم. And to bring people closer together ونبني طرق التواصل بين الشعوب. Algeria continues to pursue this path with sincerity. الجزائر تواصل هذا المهمة النبيلة العظيمة. الجزائر drawing inspiration from the deepest source of its civilization and spiritual heritage. It remains a bridge between nations. Just الأمير عبد القادر himself was a bridge through thought and his noble deeds. Yes, Amir Abdul Qadir is a bridge for us, for all, forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sharif, for your contribution. Can I now invite Professor Tom Verner Powell from the University of Manchester?
So, a very good morning to you all. And it behooves me, first of all, to offer the most fulsome possible congratulations and appreciation for this event, this second day of this ongoing event, for the broader processes of the fostering of study of القادر الجزائري at Oxford and in the United Kingdom, and indeed for the betterment of British-Algerian relations. I have been invited here, I think, partly because of my history, both with this university and with القادر الجزائري. A great deal has been said by the speakers before me about the life and the inspiring potential of Abdul Qadir. Some of that I may find myself repeating, unnecessary though that may well be. But I feel it might be useful also to reflect a little bit, not so much perhaps on my own experience, but on the experience of a scholar or prospective scholar, of a researcher, of a colleague, of a student, who might be tempted to engage with this initiative, to seize this opportunity and to deepen their knowledge of this really quite profoundly fascinating and significant figure. So that's what I'll try and do as briefly and as succinctly as I possibly can. First of all, it goes perhaps without saying that Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi is an historically significant figure. Everyone in Algeria knows that, but a great many people beyond too. Anyone who has been to Algiers has seen his statue, but many who visited Lyon or Paris will have crossed the Place d'Abdelkader. Those who join us from the United States, who spent time in Iowa, may be aware that there is a town there named in his honor, an enormously significant figure, and not least for many of the reasons that have been brought up. Part of what makes him significant, though, is what one might describe as his liminality. He's someone who lived in times and in places of enormous change and transformation. One of the many reasons, I think, why friends and colleagues have already suggested his usefulness for reflection and study today. This holds true on the grandest scale. So he came to adulthood at the eve of the French invasion of Ottoman Algeria. Subsequently, after his treacherous betrayal by the French and his imprisonment at Pau-en-Amboise, he witnessed the collapse of the July monarchy and the Year of Revolutions, 1948, of course, which swept all of Europe. On his return, he's released from captivity, stopping first in Bursa, which is almost instantly destroyed by an earthquake, moving on to Damascus. He arrives in time to witness some of the most brutally sectarian ructions brought about in no small part by the violence of the integration of the Mashriqi economy into a Eurocentric, globalized economic system. Of course, it was on that occasion that he won tremendous honor for himself by organizing a militia to save the lives of between 10 and 15,000 Christians in the city, an occasion which led to his being hailed by Queen Victoria, by Abraham Lincoln, and in spite of having been, in an earlier phase of his career, the most feared and hated military enemy of France, a recipient of the Gardien of the Legion of Honor. So these are moments of change. But how he engages with them, the kind of person he is within these moments, is also one which tends to strike not least a 21st century observer as liminal, as on the line between one thing and another, both separating and uniting. We've already heard several of these metaphors, not least in our last speech, that of the bridge or Hamzat al-Wasl. These are forms of metaphor that we use to describe something that sits astride more than one of the kind of categories we're comfortable or used to placing things within. Writing and reflection on al-Qadr al-Jazairi almost invariably returns to this style, this rhetoric, this approach to trying to capture a reality that often eludes us, or at least eludes our words, by talking about a harmony of differences, a unity and pluralism, these things we've heard already and others beside. Sometimes it's framed, and perhaps less helpfully, in terms of what particularly Western 21st century observers, overly influenced by the presumption of what Charles Taylor calls the psychology of the buffer itself, see as a kind of supposed tension or conflict between the spiritual and the social, between sharia and haqiqa, between kasb and tawakkul, between action in the world and reliance on God. That kind of contradiction is not so much what I'm talking about, not least because, as previous speakers have also made clear, it wasn't really very much of an issue for him, as far as one can see. Rather, we see in his case a figure who has been inspirational, not just to Algerian nationalism, and has had that role for a good century and more, but also to French imperialism, apparently mutually exclusive. He's someone who's been painted as and inspired people who see him as standing for a kind of Eurocentric universalism, or a radically more Islamocentric sense of an overarching unity of reality and unity of knowledge and oneness of the human condition. I think in all of these respects, he, even notwithstanding the fact that he was one of the world's foremost Sufi mujahids, a mystic who fought battles, and we can't forget that. He was very proud of his heroism in battle against the colonizing and invading French until the end of his life. This is something which fits as comfortably in the century that he shares with people like Imam Shamil in the Caucasus, Osman Dan Fodio in the Sokoto Caliphate in Nigeria, or Muhammad Ahmad, the so-called Mahdi in Sudan, as it seems contradictory, impossible, hypocritical, fraudulent, unthinkable to so many people in the 21st century who have a different set of assumptions about what religious ethics look like, what Sufism looks like, what kind of demands it can and can't make. So, in a sense, part of the opportunity which a figure like Abul Qadr al-Jazairi affords the beginning scholar, or perhaps the more advanced scholar, isn't just inspiration, it's challenge. It's someone who transgresses the kinds of categories, the kinds of assumptions, the kinds of historical teleologies where one thing leads to the other, which one comes to expect. We've already heard, and we could say more about his, how favorably his treatment of prisoners of war and civilian populations during his conflict with the French compared to the French comportment, which was, on many occasions, absolutely horrific. And yet, here is a figure who predates the Battle of Solferino and Dunant and the Red Cross, who predates, in some ways, prefigures so much humanitarian law, which would come later, and yet is clearly responding to the same exigencies. It's clearly embodying so many of the same virtues. The opportunity presented here by initiatives such as this is not, to be clear, an opportunity for the subjects of our study, not for Al-Qadr al-Jazari, not for his followers and his comrades. Those who live in the past have really very little need of our action in the present. It's for ourselves and for our children that we do this. That's already been said, as an investment in humanity, And here it's offering these challenges, and in so doing, prompting us to reimagine the possibilities of our own approaches to history, our approaches to politics, to ethics, to the world, rethinking relations between or supposed tensions, contradictions, conflicts, not just between unity and multiplicity, or between East and West, North and South, but between religion, politics, theology and history, ethics and mysticism, tradition and modernity, authenticity and contemporaneous, al-hadatha, I can't say the English word, the things that are happening now, in the present, between law and humanitarianism. They offer us an opportunity, not just to uncover the past, not just to reclaim the past, not just to right past wrongs and correct a record, but to create new possibilities in the present, which might guide us towards more fruitful, more productive, more irenic and creative futures. So, again, to circle back to this idea of investment in the future, I think this is very much the approach that seems to be taken here. I'm very happy to say, though I don't want to take any thunder away from the thunderous thunder of the Oxford Centre of Islamic Studies, but earlier this week I've heard from colleagues in Georgetown who have an interest in pursuing similar work. So this is perhaps the spearhead of a growing international interest in this fantastically useful, significant, and inspirational figure. And I thank you all once again for the invitation to speak and for your exemplary patience in listening to me do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. May I now invite Yassine Ben Abid, the Director of the Cultural Centre of the Great Mosque of Algiers. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه أستعين وأصلي وأسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. رب أوزعني أن أشكر نعمتك التي أنعمت علي وعلى والدي وأن أعمل صالحا ترضاه. رب يسر وأعين. أحيي المكان بعماره وأحيي اللحظة برمزيتها العالية. عليكم جميعا سلام الله ورحمته تعالى وبركاته، وأعتذر عن التعيين. موضوعي البعد الكوني أو الأبعاد الكونية لشخصية الأمير عبد القادر الجزائري، أسباباً ومظاهر. ما ارتاب أحد ممن تعرف الأمير عبد القادر شخصاً أو سمعة أو ثقافة أنه بعد الأنبياء والرسل عليهم الصلاة والسلام في تاريخ النبوة الطويل وتاريخ الإنسانية الأطول أنه شخصية ليس فقط مهمة ولكن من أهم ما أنجبته هذه الإنسانية. جاء إلى هذه الأرض بريطانيا يوم جاء ليلقي على صدرها الأفلاك والشهب بلغة نزار قباني، وجاءت معه حمولة الشرق كله، وجاءت معه مواقف الشرق تقول لمن ناهضها من جهات الأرض الغرب en l'occurrence: إنكم أخطأتم التقدير، فعليكم أن تراجعوا كثيرا من الأساليب التي عاملتم بها الشرق ثقافة وحضارة ولغة ومواقف وما يدخل في هذا المعنى. هذا الذي سوغ لبعض المستبصرين من الباحثين أن يصنفوه بحمولته المعرفية وبحقيقته الأنطولوجية شخصية كونية، un personnage universel. الأمير عبد القادر يستمد كونيته من مجموعة من العوامل يترأسها عامل وهو موضوعي أساس يكاد ينفرد برمزيته، هو الروحانية، la spiritualité. فروحانيته هي الأصل في كونيته، وكونيته في حكم الملغى إن أسقطت من زوايا النظر إليه هذه المسألة. اعتنى الأمير عبد القادر، وقبل أن يعتني بأن يكون كونياً على أرضية من روحانية وعلى قاعدة من تصوف، كان بالأساس في ميلاده الأول وفي منشأه الأول، المنشأ الجغرافي والمنشأ البيئي، كان كأنه صوفي بالطبيعة، وكان كأنه مشروع حمال رسالة إلى الإنسانية بالفطرة. فكانت هذه صوفية الأمير عبد القادر التي جعلت منه الشخص الذي احتفي به ويحتفى به على نحو ما نفعل الآن. وشرف الجزائر الكبير والكبير جدا أنها وفية لمشروع الأمير عبد القادر، وأنها انخرطت في هذا المسلك الوفي الذي به تبقى الجزائر كبيرة، ولن أعتذر عن التوصيف. فدخل الأمير عبد القادر إذن الكونية على هذه القاعدة، على قاعدة التصوف. استغرق التصوف مادة وميراثا وثقافة ونظرا وتنظيرا، إلى أن دخل في معترك من الأشياء ومفترق من الطرق. دعا الكثير من الباحثين والمهتمين بالشأن الإنساني أن يطرحوا جملة من الأسئلة وأن يتطارحوا فيما بينهم ما يمكن أن يكون أجوبة لهذه الأسئلة. الأمير عبد القادر إحدى الشخصيات التي استحيت، إحدى رموز الثقافة الصوفية الروحانية الإنسانية، والنوكيرونس ابن العربي. الأمير عبد القادر واحد ممن زاوجوا بين جملة من المشاريع الروحانية التي تغذت منها الإنسانية ولا زالت تتغذى منها. النفري عبد الجبار في التاريخ الأول، مولانا جلال الدين الرومي في التاريخ القريب الوسط بين الفترة الأولى وفترة الأمير، الشيخ الأكبر محي الدين بن العربي كذلك تغذى منه وصنع مواقفه إلى أن أصبحت مادة صالحة لأن تتأسس عليها الإنسانية الجديدة، وإلى أن تكبر الإنسانية الجديدة بمشاريع تغذي الأخوة وتغذي العيش بسلام وتغذي التآخي الإنساني وتغذي التقارب بين الأمم والطوائف والمجموعات وما إلى ذلك. فما أخطأ من قدر الأمير عبد القادر رحمة الله تعالى عليه ورضوانه هذا التقدير. فانطلاقا من هنا، ولعلها مفارقة بالنسبة لبعض الباحثين المتريبين في مثل مشروع الأمير عبد القادر، أن لرجل نشأ منشأ في زوايا وكبر كبرا في محيط كأنه منعزل عن غيره من سائر المحيطات، أن يصبح يوما ما حمال مشروع يدعو إليه الإنسانية وينغمس فيما يشبه أن يكون مشروعا دنيويا هو الآتي من الأرضية الروحانية. والعارفون بالشأن الروحي والعارفون بثقافات الحركيات الروحية في الإنسانية لا يستغربون الأمر، على اعتبار أن الروحانية في حقيقتها دفاعة إلى أن يستغرق الإنسان في الحياة المدنية، في الحياة الدنيوية، بالمفهوم السياسي، بالمفهوم العسكري، بالمفهوم الاجتماعي، كل ذلك بعنوان الروحانية. هذا الذي أضعه على رأس الأسباب التي بها أصبح الأمير عبد القادر وكان وسيكون رجلاً كونياً يخترق الفضاء الإنساني رغم كل الحواجز. إذا كان السؤال المتعلق بمظاهر هذه الكونية تحصيل حاصل ومن لوازم الموضوع، فمعليه لنقف وقفة متعجلة مختزلة إن شاء الله تعالى غير مخلة. فمن أسباب أقول من مظاهر كونية الأمير عبد القادر العناية بالانتماء والتعزز بالانتماء والاحتفاء بأنه رجل له انتماء يعود إليه ويدعو إليه. هذا أمر. الأمر الثاني الاشتغال على التكوين وتشغيل آلية البناء الشخصي والبناء الاجتماعي وبناء الأمة بتمامها، فقد قضى عمره كله في هذا الشأن، ويعتقد ويحسب أنه أبلى في ذلك البلاء الحسن وأنه أتى بالنتائج المرجوة من مثله. ثالثاً نعود والعود أحمد إلى المرتكز الأول وهو الروحانية. كانت الروحانية بلغتنا القريبة صوفيته سبباً رئيساً في كونيته، وتصبح الآن مظهراً رئيساً في كونيته، لأنه في واقع الحال حارب من حارب لظروف تاريخية من خروج في تفاصيلها، حارب من حارب وعنوانه الروحانية، وصالحهم يوم صالحهم على أمر ما وعنوان ذلك الروحانية، وأسس لأرضية المجتمع الجديد الإنساني فيه الغالب والمغلوب وما إلى ذلك، وعنوان ذلك الروحانية. وكانت لغته وهو يكتب رسائل الحرب، وكانت أساليبه وهو يحاور من دعاه الحال إلى أن يحاورهم، لغته كذلك الروح بلسان التصوف. وكان من حين إلى آخر بيده الفيزيائية الحية أو بيده الأخرى من خلال امتداداته من الأتباع ومن الطلبة ومن العساكر وما إلى ذلك، في يمينه السيف الذي به يحارب، وفي شماله المدونات التي تركها للتاريخ حجة له عليه، على رأسها المواقف وسائر العناوين التي تركها للإنسانية. أريد أن أختم، أعلم أني أطلت من غير احتساب للوقت، أن هناك مراجعة مع من اهتم بالتأليف في موضوع الأمير عبد القادر، وأخص بالتحديد وبالذكر مدرسة الاستشراق التي برعت، حفرت في شخصية الأمير وفي تاريخيته وفي رمزياته وما إلى ذلك، ولكنها برعت في أمر نقيض هو تجاوز روحانية الأمير والقفز على الشخصية الصوفية للأمير، كأنهم تحاشوا أن يبدو للإنسانية أن الروح بإمكانها أن تأتي بالحلول للإنسانية، وأن التصوف لأول مرة أتحدث التصوف الإنساني بالنسبة لي مشاهدة، ولكن السياق دعا إلى ذلك، أن التصوف بحكمه لغة للروح وبحكمه سلطانا للروح يمكن أن يصالح بين الجميع، ويمكن أن يدعو إنسانية اليوم إلى أن تلتقي على نزعة واحدة، على خلق واحد، على مشروع واحد، وعلى غاية واحدة. أشكركم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benavid. May I now invite Professor Mohammed Bouabdallah to the stage, please. My apologies, we do have a translation for this speech, so please welcome them.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Anisa Daudi, professor at the University of Birmingham. I just wanted to translate some points that the professor had just said. So his speech was, I would like to stress on the importance of the humanitarian dimension of Al-Amir Abdul-Qadir. He came to Britain, and with him came the inspiration of the whole East. He came to ask them here in Britain to rebuild and rethink the way they treated the East. This is why he was given the title of universal human being. His spirituality lies in his human side. His spirituality is both geographical and intellectual. It's based on his spirituality is based on Sufism and its schooling. The Amir arrived to this reputation thanks to his, as I said, spirituality and also his readings, as he was a pupil of Ibn Arabi, Jalal al-Rumi, and many others. Starting from the Amir's reputation, we notice that his project is mainly Sufi, and his Sufism is central to his universality. So there's both ways. He built his program. He built his program on the same readings of Ibn Arabi and others. And finally, I would like to stress, this is what I find really interesting and a point that I wanted to reiterate, which is the importance of rereading Ibn Arabi and dismantling the Orientalist interpretations of his work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for so masterfully summing up the contribution. And may I now invite you to speak.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, Assalamu alaikum, very good morning to you all. It is a genuine honor to be here at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies on this particular occasion, the launch of the Amir Abdul-Qadir program. The very existence of this program is itself an act of historical recognition, and it is fitting that we mark it by returning to an episode in the Amir's life that history somewhat surprisingly has largely overlooked. My brief talk today is about Al-Amir Abdul-Qadir's visit to London, summer 1865. It will be based on a paper which will be published soon entitled Al-Amir Abdul-Qadir in London, 1865, Islamic Authority in an Age of Empire. In about 8 minutes, I want to do 3 things. Give you the man, reconstruct the visit day by day, and then draw out what I think it all means for our understanding of Al-Amir Abdul-Qadir, and for the broader question of how 19th century Europe perceived and sometimes misperceived the Arab and Muslim world. Scholars who have studied the history of modern Algeria and indeed of the modern Arab world agree that there has rarely been a figure of the weight and complexity of Al-Amir Abdul-Qadir al-Jazairi. He was simultaneously a warrior and a statesman and a great scholar who produced serious theology and Sufi philosophy, a poet of real distinction, and a diplomat who operated across cultures with a sophistication that astonishes even today. The 1865 visit did not come out of nowhere. There is a longer history of engagement between Al-Amir Abdul Qadir and the British, one that I would argue has not received the attention it deserves. It begins in January 1836 when Al-Amir Abdul Qadir sends his envoy Muhammad ibn Qalala to the British consulate in Tangier carrying 2 letters. The first is addressed to the consul himself, and the second, and this is the remarkable one, is addressed personally to King William IV of Great Britain. In the letter to the consul, Abdul Qadir styles himself Sultan, the only time that he ever used that title in writing. In the letter to the king, he uses a more careful formulation, Commander of the faithful in the regions of Oran and Algiers, أمير المؤمنين في نواحي وهران والجزائر وما يجاورها من تونس. He is a man who controls a relatively small territory in western Algeria, and yet he is writing to the sovereign of the world's greatest empire, drawing boundaries that extend of Tunisia. The substance of the letter is a proposal. In exchange for diplomatic recognition and British pressure on France, Al-Amir Abdul Qadir would open his ports to British trade. It is sophisticated offer sovereignty for commerce, a language Britain understood well. Unfortunately, the initiative failed, largely because of a translation error. The offer to open Algerian ports was misread as a request of a meeting at a port, which the British deemed impractical and declined. But the episode tells us something important. Al-Amir Abdul Qadir has intelligence about European power dynamics and awareness of the rivalry between Britain and France and the audacity to try to exploit. My sources of this paper will be based, I don't have time to elaborate, but based on these 5 sources: the Crystal Palace Archive, the Royal Archive at Buckingham Palace, the Royal Library at Windsor Castle, the National Archive at Kew Gardens, and the British Newspaper Archive. Let me now walk you through the visit quickly, day by day. Tuesday, the 1st of August, the Amir boards the steamer Alexandra at Boulogne at 4:30 in the afternoon, accompanied by approximately 20 members of his suite. Only a handful of papers carry even a brief notice. He arrives at Folkestone that evening. Wednesday, the 2nd of August, he travels to London by the South Eastern Railway. He is lodged at the Brunswick Hotel in Jermyn Street. I want to pause on this address for a moment. Jermyn Street in London is 5 minutes walk from Buckingham Palace. It is also 5 minutes walk from Downing Street. Queen Victoria was the Queen at the time. Lord Palmerston was the Prime Minister, and his visit came 2 months after a general election. Wherever the Amir went in London, he was geographically proximate to the 2 centers of British sovereign power. Whether this was intentional or coincidental, it carries a symbolic weight that the press did not fail to notice. Thursday, the 3rd of August, an initial exploratory visit to Crystal Palace in the company of Mr. Hackard, the French consul in Damascus, who is, we should note simultaneously, the Emir's escort and his French government monitor. Friday, the 4th of August, Amir visits the British Museum, where he is received by Sir Anthony Pannisi, the principal librarian, a naturalized Italian, and interesting choice of host in itself. The Amir spent a long time in the Egyptian galleries and expressed deep admiration for what he sees. Saturday, the 5th of August, the grand occasion, the formal reception at Crystal Palace. He is welcomed by the chairman, Mr. Foucault, the managing director, Mr. Bowley. He chose the exhibitions in his white Algerian barnous. He attended a concert And here, the Daily News gives one of the most vivid moments in the entire press coverage. And I'm quoting here, the soprano Titian sang "Home, Sweet Home." The Amir, through his interpreter, asked for the meaning of the words. When it was explained to him, he joined in the applause. I do not know whether to read that moment as poignant or ironic, perhaps both. A man exiled from his country for nearly 20 years, living in a city that is not his own, under the supervision of the government that conquered his people, asking what home, sweet home means. The same Saturday evening, the Amir receives a delegation from the Aborigines Protection Society at the Brunswick Hotel. This is a significant encounter. This society, founded in 1837, was an international human rights organization. It campaigned against colonial abuses, particularly those perpetrated by British imperial power. The delegation is led by Dr. Thomas Hawking, the physician and historian. It also includes Professor Antonius Amanui at King's College London, who serves as Arabic interpreter, and the Orientalist Thomas Chinnery of the Times. The Amir expresses his gratitude and says he wishes to become a member of the society. Sunday, the 6th of August, a formal dinner hosted by the French press magnate Émile de Giranda. Monday, the 7th of August, departure. Al-Amir and his suite leave the Brunswick Hotel in 4 carriages at dawn. As they pass through the streets of London, women lean from balconies to wave. The Morning Herald records the scene. He is in his distinctive white burnous, acknowledging the crowd. He boards the 8:05 train to Folkestone across the Poland and reaches Paris at 6:30 that evening. And let me quickly close with 4 conclusions. First, the deliberate informality of the visit was a political act. There was no royal reception, no government meeting, no official acknowledgement, and yet the Amir was lodged within walking distance of Buckingham Palace and Downing Street. The informality was a message to France, nothing to worry about. The hospitality was a message to Al-Amir Abdul Qadir, you are welcome here, but not officially. Britain's careful neutrality was itself a position. Second, the French surveillance reveals the depth of French anxiety. If the visit were truly private and inconsequential, Paris would not have sent its police chief to London. The elaborate French presence throughout the 5 days tells us that 30 years after Al-Amir's first letter to King William, France was still worried about the Amir might accomplish on British soil. They were right to be attentive. The APS meeting alone had significant human rights implications. Third, the geographic spread of the press coverage tells us something important about Al-Amir Abdul Qadir's place in the Victorian imagination. This was not an elite London fascination. Readers in Wales, Lancashire, and Ireland followed his visits. A Belfast paper reported with evident delight that a man in York had been arrested for claiming to be Abdul Qadir and demanding to be taken to the emperor. The story is comic. The underlying fact is serious. Al-Amir had become a popular figure, a name ordinary people recognized and associated with courage, justice, and romance. The launch of the Amir Abdul Qadir program at Oxford today is itself part of this long British engagement with the Amir Abdul Qadir legacy, an engagement that, as I have tried to show, goes back at least to 1836. What this program does, what it makes possible, is precisely the kind of scholarship that crosses boundaries between languages, between disciplines, between the archive and the newspaper, between the political and the personal. Al-Amir himself crossed those boundaries all his life. He was Algerian and Damasan, Muslim and admired by Christians. He was a mujahid who became a pacifist. He was enemy, a man who fought colonialism and was feted in the capital of the world's greatest colonial empire. He contained contradiction that the 19th century could not resolve and that we are still working through. In August 1865, as his carriage moved through the street of London and women waved from balconies at a man in a white burnous, a man they could not have spoken to, whose language they did not share, whose history they knew only imperfectly, something genuinely important was happening, a recognition, however incomplete, across a great distance. I hope today's occasion continues that recognition with rather more depth and accuracy than Victorian balcony waving permitted. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you.
So may I once again offer our thanks to His Excellency for beginning this panel, and thank you to all the speakers for these rich reflections on the life and legacy of Amir Abdulkader al-Jazairi. Please bear with us while we transition into the next panel, which my colleague will introduce.
Right, I'm pleased to introduce the second panel on science, technology and higher education. This will be presided over by His Excellency Professor Kamal Badari, the Minister for Higher Education and Scientific Research. Speaking on this panel will be Sir David Clary, who is President Emeritus, Magdalen College, University of Oxford, and the former Chief Scientific Advisor to the Foreign Commonwealth Office. The second speaker will be Professor Adil Najam, the President of the World Wildlife Fund International and Dean Emeritus, Frederick S. Pardee School of Global Studies, Boston University. And our third speaker will be Professor Shahid Jamil, who's a fellow at Green Templeton College at University of Oxford.